Action films have always presented themselves as clean, controlled chaos, perfectly timed explosions, carefully rehearsed stunts, and heroes who seem carved from steel. But what audiences never witness is the far more unpredictable world hidden just outside the frame, where egos clash, tempers ignite, and entire productions teeter on the brink because the stars meant to anchor them become the very forces pulling them apart. Hollywood loves to present unity, harmony, and teamwork. Contracts, press tours, and studio PR machines work endlessly to preserve that illusion. Behind closed doors, the truth often looks very different. Some of the biggest action movies ever made were nearly derailed, not by accidents, budget disasters, or creative disagreements, but by the actors whose names sold the tickets. The very individuals trusted to bring the story to life became the storms threatening to tear it down. Tonight, we step into that hidden world. We'll uncover the films thrown into chaos when their leading stars refused to cooperate, rewrote scripts on a whim, vanished from set, clashed violently with directors, or demanded control far beyond what any actor should wield. These weren't minor disruptions. They were battles that reshaped scripts, shattered production schedules, drained budgets, and pushed entire crews to the edge of collapse. Some of these movies survived through sheer determination. Others limped across the finish line, patched together with editing tricks and desperate rewrites. And a few exist today only because studios buried the real stories so deep that the public never learned how close these blockbusters came to blowing apart from the inside. So settle in, because the explosions you saw on screen were nothing compared to what happened where the cameras could never show you. Fact 1. Die Hard 1988. Bruce Willis in a production already on thin ice. When Bruce Willis stepped into Die Hard, he wasn't yet the bulletproof action star history remembers. He was an untested TV actor suddenly expected to carry a massive studio picture, and that uncertainty crashed headfirst into the production. From the earliest days of filming, Willis questioned almost everything: lines, motivations, blocking tone. Crew members recalled that no scene felt safe from being challenged or written minutes before cameras rolled. But the real friction came with the action itself. McClane was originally crafted as a vulnerable, reluctant hero, a man barely staying alive. Willis pushed back, refusing to perform key stunts and rejecting choreography he felt didn't suit his interpretation. Entire setups were tossed aside. Stunt teams scrambled to redesign sequences, and the schedule wobbled under the weight of constant change. Director John McTiernan tried to steady the chaos, yet even he struggled to keep momentum while adjusting to the evolving whims of his lead actor. Studio executives panicked as early footage came in inconsistent, disjointed, and sometimes unusable. Behind closed doors, there were murmurs that the film might collapse under the tension between what it was supposed to be and what Willis wanted it to become. And still, through frustration and frantic rewrites, a character emerged, partly planned, partly improvised, partly born from conflict. What audiences eventually saw on screen was a miracle shaped by turmoil. A film that survived in spite of its own star's resistance. Fact 2. The Expendables. 3/2014. When Stallone's dream collided with Willis's demands. The Expendables franchise was built on the chemistry of its powerhouse cast action legends, uniting on equal footing. But behind that camaraderie lay egos simmering beneath the surface. During preparations for the third film, everything nearly detonated when Bruce Willis delivered a blunt, uncompromising ultimatum. An exorbitant payday for just a handful of shooting days. No negotiation, no flexibility. The demand blindsided everyone. Stallone had crafted the story with Willis's character in mind, and entire action sequences hinged on his involvement. Losing him meant ripping out massive chunks of narrative structure. When Stallone refused the financial terms, Willis simply threatened to walk. Panic erupted. Writers tore through pages overnight, carving out a new narrative. Producers made frantic calls. Schedules buckled as the creative team scrambled to replace a major role on impossibly short notice. Stallone, normally calm under pressure, reached a breaking point, publicly condemning Willis in a rare moment of raw honesty that sent shockwaves through the industry. Harrison Ford was rushed in as a replacement, joining the production at the 11th hour. With almost no preparation time, he stepped into a role originally written for an entirely different actor, forcing hurried rewrites and on-set improvisation just to keep the film functional. The finished movie masks the emergency that birthed it. But within industry circles, the story remains infamous. A blockbuster almost destroyed not by explosions, but by a single star's refusal to play by the rules. Fact 3. Blade Trinity 2004 Wesley Snipes and the spiral into madness. The turmoil surrounding Blade Trinity has become the stuff of legend, an ordeal marked not by creative differences, but by a total breakdown between star and production. Wesley Snipes, once the defining force of the franchise, arrived on set with an air of distrust and simmering resentment. He felt the spotlight was being shifted away from him, and that paranoia began to shape every moment of the shoot. Snipes withdrew from the crew, isolating himself in his trailer and refusing direct interaction with the director. Communication evolved into cryptic, handwritten notes. Scenes that required his presence stalled for hours. Some days he appeared only long enough to record a few lines or stand in a single position before retreating again. The atmosphere on set grew tense, unstable, almost surreal. When Snipes did perform, conflict often followed. He dismissed blocking rewrote dialogue as he pleased and undermined emotional beats. Reports spread of outbursts, confrontations, and even physical altercations. The crew learned to work around him, a bizarre feat for a film whose lead character was central to nearly every scene. Editors later revealed that a shocking amount of Snipes' screen time had to be salvaged using stand-ins, alternate angles, or digital tricks. The final film is a patchwork stitched together by necessity, not creative choice. What was meant to be a triumphant continuation of a beloved franchise instead became a cautionary tale how a single performance or the refusal to give one can unravel an entire production from within. Fact 4. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1985. Mel Gibson's inner turmoil leading into the wasteland. When Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome entered production, the franchise already carried the weight of myth. But the energy on set was anything but heroic. Mel Gibson stepped into the third film carrying a heaviness that no costume or script could mask. Friends and crew members noticed it instantly, an unpredictability beneath the surface, a restlessness that made every day feel like walking across a minefield. Gibson challenged the script constantly, insisting that Max was more hardened, more haunted, more detached than the page suggested. Scenes that had taken weeks to plan evaporated minutes before lensing because Gibson disagreed with a gesture, a line, a moment of vulnerability. Stunt teams rebuilt action beats in real time. Schedules warped. The directors George Miller and George Ogilvy found themselves recalibrating the movie around an actor who seemed unable to settle into the role he had once defined. Much of this quiet chaos stemmed from the production's emotional backdrop. Miller was grieving the loss of his producing partner Byron Kennedy, and the set already felt fragile. Gibson's own instability only amplified that fragility, creating an environment where minor disagreements escalated into major detours. Some crew members described the atmosphere as tension suspended in desert heat. Scenes were shaped by raw emotion rather than planning. Max Rockatansky's weariness, so striking on screen, was partly born from the real exhaustion simmering behind the camera. The final film hides many of these cracks beneath its spectacle. But in the dust beneath Bartertown lay the remnants of a production held together not by cohesion, but by sheer willpower amid personal storms. Fact 5. Mission Impossible 2. 2000 Tom Cruise's dangerous vision redefines the film. For Mission Impossible 2. Good sir. Tom Cruise wasn't just the star, he was the engine powering every creative decision. Determined to push action cinema into new territory, Cruise immersed himself in the stunts with a level of intensity that unsettled even seasoned professionals. He insisted on performing nearly everything himself: the free climb on the rock face, the motorcycle duel, the knife pressed a hair's breadth from his eye. What looked effortless on screen was behind the scenes a vortex of rewrites, reshoots, and logistical nightmares. Director John Woo arrived with a clear vision, but Cruise constantly demanded adjustments. He wanted more danger, more flair, more physical risk. Each request required hours, sometimes days of re-engineering safety rigs, redesigning the choreography, and coordinating with stunt departments stretched to their limit. Scenes originally intended to be simple became elaborate set pieces, their complexity spiraling well beyond the intended scope. The timeline collapsed under the revisions. The budget swelled as days turned into weeks. Other productions across Hollywood suffered as actors contracted for MI. Two found themselves stuck in Australia, unable to leave, while Cruise and Woo continued pushing the action further. Privately, crew members confessed they admired Cruise's devotion, but feared it too. Every time he dangled from a cliff or launched himself into a stunt, there was a collective breath held across the set. His pursuit of perfection borderline obsessive, became both the film's strength and its greatest strain. By the time the movie wrapped, everyone knew they had created something audacious. They also knew the cost of production bent around a star whose desire for spectacle pushed everyone, including himself, to the far edge of danger. Fact 6. Waterworld 1995. Kevin Costner's need for control sends the film adrift. Waterworld began as the bold vision, an aquatic epic unlike anything Hollywood had ever attempted. But as soon as the cameras rolled, that vision was overshadowed by Kevin Costner's overwhelming need to command every detail. Fresh off of major critical and commercial successes, Costner carried a level of authority few actors had ever possessed. And on Waterworld, that authority became a tidal wave. Costner challenged director Kevin Reynolds at nearly every turn. He fought for script changes, character changes, tonal changes. Scenes that were already complicated by the ocean became exponentially harder as Costner pushed for adjustments that required rebuilding floating sets, re-rigging boats, or restaging elaborate water sequences. Crew members already battling brutal conditions now found themselves responding to daily creative shifts with little room to breathe. Tensions worsened as the budget ballooned. Storms destroyed sets, equipment malfunctioned. But instead of calming the waters, Costner tightened his grip. He demanded creative oversight far beyond his role, influencing everything from dialogue to camera angles to editorial decisions. Meanwhile, the crew lived in cramped, uncomfortable quarters on the water while Costner returned each night to a private villa, fueling resentment that only deepened. By the time filming ended, friendships had fractured, Reynolds had walked away, and the production had become Hollywood's favorite disaster joke. But behind the ridicule was a deeper truth. Waterworld wasn't undone by weather or misfortune. It was sunk by competing visions, with Costner's dominance steering the ship into a storm it couldn't withstand. Fact 7. Speed 2, Cruise Control, 1997. Sandra Bullock's reluctance drains the film's momentum. When Speed 2 entered production, the studio expected that Sandra Bullock's charm alone would carry the sequel. What they didn't expect was a reluctant star stepping into a project she didn't believe in. Bullock had already expressed that she didn't want to return to the franchise. She didn't like the script, she didn't want to be boxed into action roles, and she was uneasy about the film's direction. Yet, contractual obligations and complicated negotiations pulled her back in. Her hesitation seeped into every corner of the set. Bullock resisted the physical intensity the script demanded, declining many of the stunt-driven sequences that the filmmakers had envisioned for Annie. As a result, entire action beats had to be toned down, rewritten, or removed completely. Instead of anchoring moments of danger, her character was gradually rewritten into a more passive presence, weakening the structure of the film itself. The production struggled to maintain momentum. A massive cruise ship, set already a logistical nightmare, required precise timing that depended on cast engagement. Bullock's reluctance forced the crew to rethink choreography and camera setups daily. Writers were tasked with softening scenes around her, adjusting motivations, or building new subplots to fill the gaps left by her absence from key action moments. Behind the scenes, whispers began circulating. The sequel lacked the spark that made the original a phenomenon, and the cracks were visible long before the camera stopped rolling. Bullock did her best with the material she accepted, but the strain was undeniable. What audiences eventually saw was a movie missing its pulse, not because of poor concept alone, but because its leading star's heart was never in it. Fact 8. Top Gun 1986. Tom Cruise reshapes Maverick into a legend. The myth of Top Gun, the swagger, the speed, the adrenaline, is inseparable from Tom Cruise. But behind the polished veneer of aviators and high-altitude bravado, Cruise was exerting a powerful creative influence that reshaped the entire identity of the film. Even as a rising star, he understood the importance of controlling his image, and Maverick became the battlefield on which that image was forged. Cruise pushed back against lines that made Maverick seem vulnerable, uncertain. Scenes portraying him as reckless or flawed were softened or restructured. He repeatedly met with producers and writers to recalibrate the character, steering him toward a persona defined by competence, charisma, and near-mythic confidence. At times, entire pages of dialogue were dropped minutes before shooting. The action sequences bore the weight of his ambition, too. Cruise lobbied for more cockpit time, more aerial hero shots, and more moments that emphasized Maverick's mastery rather than his mistakes. These requests, sometimes delivered at the last possible moment, created logistical challenges for the aerial units. Cameras were repositioned, flight sequences rewritten, and safety teams stretched thin to accommodate new angles or extended maneuvers. The romantic storyline evolved as well. Early drafts gave Maverick more emotional depth, but Cruise steered it towards something cooler and more stylized, ensuring that vulnerability never overshadowed bravado. What resulted was a character built from equal parts performance and strategic self-curation. Maverick soared not just because of the film's iconic imagery, but because Cruise ensured he existed as a cinematic ideal. And the shakeups behind the scenes, while hidden from audiences, shaped one of action cinema's most enduring icons. Fact 9. The Island of Dr. Moreau. 1996, Val Kilmer turns the set into a pressure cooker. Few productions spiraled into chaos as spectacularly as The Island of Dr. Moreau. What should have been a strange but compelling adaptation became a cautionary tale of unchecked stars and broken systems, and Val Kilmer was at the epicenter of the implosion. Fresh off the success of Batman Forever, Kilmer approached the film with an aura of frustration and bitterness, treating cast and crew with an unpredictability that rattled even veteran professionals. He arrived late, left early, and frequently refused to shoot scenes he considered beneath him. Dialogue was dismissed, blocking ignored, and notes from the director brushed aside. Crew members recounted days where Kilmer sat silently, stone-faced, while everyone waited for him to cooperate. Other days erupted in sudden fury, shouting matches, tense standoffs, and once an alleged physical altercation with a cameraman. The instability drove director Richard Stanley into an emotional spiral from which he didn't recover. His firing was a direct consequence of Kilmer's behavior and the chaos it triggered. When John Frankenheimer took over, he clashed immediately with Kilmer, famously stating he would never work with the actor again. But Kilmer couldn't be removed, contractually protected and central to too many scenes. The rest of the cast adapted by avoiding him, with some scenes filmed using doubles simply to bypass his refusal to engage. The creature-suited extras working through brutal heat endured his indifference or hostility in silence. By the end of the shoot, morale had collapsed. What should have been a bizarre but compelling sci-fi fable became a disjointed fever dream, its production scarred by an actor whose presence eclipsed the story, the director, and the sanity of everyone involved. Fact 10. Tango and Cash, 1989. Stallone's creative dominance knocks the production. Tango and Cash was designed to be a lively, high-energy buddy cop thriller, a mashup of quips and explosions carried by the contrasting styles of Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell. But as filming progressed, the production found itself wrestling with a force far more disruptive than its over-the-top script, Stallone's relentless drive to reshape the movie in his own image. Stallone arrived on set with a firm vision of who Ray Tango should be. Sharper, wittier, more polished, and he pushed that vision with unwavering intensity. Entire scenes were torn apart and rebuilt as he requested new lines, new gestures, or new motivations. Writers were summoned multiple times a day to revise pages already approved and rehearsed. The camera department often had to adjust setups just minutes before shooting because the dialogue they'd prepared for no longer existed. His interventions didn't stop at acting or writing. Stallone questioned wardrobe lighting choices and even the comedic tone originally planned for the film. Director Andrei Konchalovsky found himself increasingly sidelined as Stallone's influence grew. Their conflicting perspectives, gritty realism versus stylized flamboyance, pulled the movie in two incompatible directions. Eventually, the tension became so severe that Konchalovsky was removed, replaced by Albert Magnoli, who inherited a production already splintered into creative factions. Kurt Russell made repeated efforts to stabilize the energy on set, but even he struggled to keep pace with the constant shifts. Crew members described days where the movie didn't evolve. It mutated, reshaped again and again, until no one was quite sure what version they were shooting. In the final cut, flashes of brilliance remain, but so do the seams. Behind its slick veneer lies the memory of a film pulled taut between competing visions, nearly undone by the drive of a star whose control reached far beyond the frame. Fact 11. The Bourne Identity 2002. Matt Damon's battle for a different kind of action hero. When The Bourne Identity began filming, Universal expected a sleek espionage thriller with stylish set pieces and a traditional hero. What they received instead was a project slowly transformed by Matt Damon's passion for a more grounded, character-focused story. Damon didn't want Jason Bourne to be another invincible blockbuster figure. He wanted him human, conflicted, haunted. And that desire reshaped the production from the inside out. Damon debated endlessly with writers and director Doug Liman about tone and motivation. He pushed for emotional layering in scenes originally written as straightforward action beats. He rejected lines he felt were too flashy, too smart, or too conventionally Hollywood. Fight scenes were reworked to emphasize desperation rather than grace. The chase sequences were rewritten to reflect Bourne's confusion rather than confidence. Liman supported many of Damon's instincts, but the studio did not. Executives grew nervous as action sequences were downsized or delayed in favor of psychological nuance. Massive set pieces had to be rebuilt after Damon proposed changes hours before filming. Production rapidly fell behind schedule. At one point, Universal nearly pulled the plug, fearing the movie would become an art house drama disguised as an action film. Reshoots became the norm. Damon continued refining the character, even in post-production lobbying for adjustments that would deepen Bourne's vulnerability. Editors were instructed to find ways to weave tension through quieter moments, elevating scenes that were originally considered secondary. The result, ironically, became revolutionary. The Bourne-style handheld chaos, raw physicality, and grounded character work ended up reshaping action cinema for a decade. But the production itself was defined by upheaval, driven by an actor determined to reinvent what an action hero could be, no matter the cost. Fact 12. Coxex 2002. Vin Diesel's alpha persona overpowers the story. Coxex was crafted to introduce a new breed of action hero. Loud, extreme, rebellious, and Vin Diesel embraced that identity with a conviction that overwhelmed the production. From the start, Diesel saw Xander Cage not just as a character, but as an extension of his personal brand. Indestructible, unapologetically dominant, always in control. And he fought fiercely to keep that image intact. Diesel challenged dialogue that made Xander appear unsure or conflicted, demanding changes that emphasized swagger over complexity. Emotional beats were trimmed down or removed altogether. Scenes designed to reveal flaws or vulnerability were rewritten, so Xander would always emerge victorious. Writers found themselves reconstructing the narrative around a protagonist who could never meaningfully fail. Action sequences expanded as Diesel insisted on amplifying the intensity. Bigger jumps, faster speeds, more elaborate stunts. Safety teams and stunt coordinators scrambled to adjust setups, often working late into the night to accommodate new demands. Set pieces, originally intended for one shooting day, stretched into multiple as choreography was redesigned to spotlight Diesel's physicality. Even the supporting cast was reshaped. Characters who were meant to challenge Xander or complicate his journey were softened or sidelined. Diesel wanted Xander to dominate every frame, and the production had no choice but to adapt. Crew members later admitted they were drained by the constant rewrites and power struggles. Editors, too, faced an uphill battle piecing together scenes that sometimes contradicted earlier character arcs due to last-minute changes. What landed in theaters was a stylized avalanche of stunts and attitude, exactly the icon Diesel wanted Xander Cage to be. But beneath the spectacle was a film bent to the will of its star, a production reshaped not through collaboration, but through sheer force of ego. Fact 13, Predator 1987. Van Damme's frustration turns the jungle toxic. Long before the Predator became an icon of creature design, Jean-Claude Van Damme was the man inside the original suit, a fact many fans still don't know. But what happened during those early days of filming has become one of Hollywood's most infamous cautionary tales. Van Damme arrived expecting a showcase for his martial artistry, only to discover he would be buried inside a cumbersome, awkward red suit he believed would destroy his career rather than launch it. From the outset, Van Damme grew resentful. The heat of the Mexican jungle combined with the claustrophobic suit created conditions he described as unbearable. But his anger ran deeper in his eyes. He wasn't performing. He was being hidden. Complaints escalated into arguments with the effects team, who struggled to mold the Predator into its evolving form. Van Damme pushed for sleek movements, acrobatics, and visibility, while the production needed something monstrous, lumbering, and alien. Tensions mounted as Van Damme refused to film certain takes, walked off set, or exploded into fury over costume discomfort. The creature suit was redesigned repeatedly. Each iteration met with new frustrations. Other cast members, already physically drained from filming in brutal terrain, watched in disbelief as hours evaporated in standoffs and negotiations. The breaking point came when Van Damme learned he would never be recognizable in the final film. His face wouldn't appear, his physique wouldn't matter, and performance would be overshadowed by special effects. Shortly after, he was dismissed, leaving the production scrambling to rebuild the creature from scratch. Stan Winston's team eventually delivered the now legendary design, but only after the chaos Van Damme left behind. In the finished movie, the Predator is terrifying, iconic, unforgettable. But behind every frame lies the ghost of a creature and a star that nearly doomed the entire project before it ever took shape. Fact 14. Lethal Weapon 4, 1998. Mel Gibson's off-screen turmoil shakes the franchise. By the time Lethal Weapon 4 rolled around, Mel Gibson had become inseparable from Martin Riggs, the unhinged, charismatic live wire who powered the franchise. But off-screen, Gibson was battling his own storm's intense public scrutiny fatigue and personal issues that weighed heavily on his presence. Those storms traveled with him onto the set. Crew members recall a working environment defined by unpredictability. Some days Gibson arrived focused and energized. Others he wandered through scenes improvising wildly, discarding pages of dialogue or altering emotional beats that anchored the narrative. His spontaneity, once a creative asset, became a source of constant instability. Entire scenes had to be reshaped mid-shoot to match whatever direction Gibson had shifted toward that morning. Action sequences already complex and dangerous turned into logistical puzzles. Gibson rejected certain stunts, calling for rewrites or demanding choreography be changed at the last minute. Stunt coordinators scrambled to keep up, often rebuilding setups on the fly. Jet Li's arrival, bringing a new level of physical precision to the franchise, only heightened the pressure, and the contrast between their working styles intensified tensions. Director Richard Donner, a veteran at navigating Gibson's volatility, worked tirelessly to keep morale afloat. But even he struggled to maintain cohesion when the emotional foundation of the film kept shifting. Behind the laughter and banter that defined the series, the atmosphere felt strained, uncertain, almost fragile. When audiences watched the film, they saw the humor, the action, the camaraderie. What they didn't see were the countless moments of recalibration, behind the scenes, proof that even a beloved franchise can be rattled when its leading star arrives carrying a storm the cameras can't capture. Fact 15. The Avengers, 1998. Ralph Fiennes' disdain freezes an already wobbling production. Before Marvel dominated the box office, Hollywood attempted a different version of the Avengers, a quirky, stylized adaptation of the classic British spy series. With Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman attached, the studio expected charm chemistry and playful espionage. What they got instead was a production undone from within, led in part by a star who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. From the beginning, Fiennes regarded the script with open contempt. He rolled his eyes during table reads, dismissed witty banter as nonsense, and pushed back against tonal choices meant to evoke the whimsy of the original series. His detachment seeped into the atmosphere. Instead of a spirited partnership with Thurman, scenes often played cold, hollow, or awkward, mirroring his boredom. Directorial notes were ignored. Blocking was treated as optional. Takes were ruined by flat delivery or half-hearted engagement. Some days Fiennes wandered through scenes with the energy of someone waiting for the ordeal to end. Crew members whispered that he seemed embarrassed by the film, and that embarrassment infected the rest of the production like a quiet poison. The already shaky production, plagued by script rewrites and studio interference, buckled under the weight of his indifference. Editors later struggled to assemble a coherent emotional arc because Fiennes' performance varied wildly depending on his mood. A movie that needed charm and enthusiasm instead became a patchwork of mismatched tones and strained interactions. In the end, The Avengers fizzled, dismissed as one of the decade's most baffling misfires. But those who were there knew the deeper truth: a film can survive bad effects, weak writing, even studio meddling. What it cannot survive is a leading man who simply doesn't care. Bonus fact: The Crow, 1994. A tragedy born from negligence and silence. The Crow was meant to be Brandon Lee's moment. His chance to finally emerge from the shadow of a legendary father and establish himself as a star in his own right. Instead, it became a haunting reminder of the fragility of filmmaking, a tragedy forged not by fate, but by a series of avoidable missteps that the industry worked swiftly to bury. Production had been troubled from the start. The crew faced relentless night shoots, freezing conditions, and a rushed schedule designed to keep costs down. Safety protocols were stretched thin as exhausted workers pushed through long hours. Corners were cut quietly, unnoticed by anyone except those who knew how dangerous the shortcuts really were. The set developed a reputation for accidents and near disasters, whispers of which circulated among cast and crew. Weapons handling, already a critical responsibility, became one of the production's weakest links. Prop masters were shuffled between departments, ammunition wasn't checked thoroughly enough, and last-minute decisions replaced established procedure. Everyone felt the mounting pressure to just get the shot and move on, even when instinct warned otherwise. On the night of the fatal scene, all those compromises collided. A revolver that should have been harmless held a fragment of a dummy bullet lodged deep in its barrel, an oversight caused by improper preparation earlier in the shoot. When the blank round fired, the fragment was propelled with the force of a real bullet. Brandon Lee collapsed, and for a horrifying moment, many believed he was simply acting. But the truth revealed itself quickly, and panic overtook the set. Despite desperate medical efforts, Brandon died in the hospital hours later. He was only 28. In the aftermath, Hollywood moved quickly to contain the fallout. Statements were softened, responsibility blurred. Lawsuits were settled out of public view. The industry labeled the death a freak accident, but those who had lived through the production knew better. Knew how many safety warnings had gone unheeded, how many small risks had accumulated until they formed something catastrophic. The film was eventually completed, and Brandon's performance remains haunting, timeless, and unforgettable. But beneath the final product lies a sorrowful truth. The Crow succeeded not because of the system that supported it, but in spite of a system that failed him when he needed it most. The stories hidden behind these films remind us that Hollywood's brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. What you see on screen is only the performance. What happens behind closed doors is the truth that rarely reaches the public. If these hidden battles, unspoken tensions, and buried secrets drew you deeper into the world behind the curtain, know this: there are countless more waiting to surface. Stay close, because the further we go, the more the facade fades, revealing a Hollywood far stranger, darker, and more human than anyone ever admits.